welcome to tonight. I'm so glad to have you here. We're going to be talking about practicing. Um, we're going to be talking about intentional practice, a couple really fun things that go into that, and then also what Spark Practice is up to this year. So if everybody has their PDF, it's a special PDF for the open house. Yay! Go ahead and open that, and it'll be just like a fun little way to follow along and keep notes. But if you don't have it, it's not a big deal either. So a little bit about me. My name is Sarah Niblack, and I made up Spark Practice because I needed a way to put everything together in my mind of what practicing is and could be, and do it in a way that was healthy and helped me retain humanity while striving for excellence. And this is something that I've been thinking about for a really long time and studying for a really long time. I used to be a Division I scholarship rower. That's how I paid for school, and I went to Cincinnati Conservatory. So being the second person in the history of the school, the first person was a tuba player in the 40s, but to go to a nationally ranked conservatory on a Division I scholarship is pretty rare, but it let me backstage to a bunch of different experiences that have finally come together in Spark Practice, which is the intentional practice system, which basically means that I wanted to find a way to bring in all of the really cool theory of sports psychology, top musical training, neuroscience, and mindfulness, and do it in a way that we can actually apply easily in the practice room. Yay! Alright, so on the top of our PDF, there's a little question that I would like everybody to think about for a little while, which is, where do I want to be at the end of the year? So just take a second and think to yourself, okay, I'm sitting at the beginning of the year. That's cool. I did a bunch of things last year. Maybe I had a pretty cool summer. Maybe the summer was a little bit slow. At the end of the school year, so in June or July, where do I want to be? What do I want to have accomplished? How do I want to feel? And it could be a goal with yourself, it could be a playing goal, it could be having taken an audition, it could be finishing a recording cycle, it could be playing for your neighbors, it could be anything. It could really be anything. But think about where you want to be at the end of this. All right, everybody have an idea? Awesome. From where you're sitting, does it seem realistically possible? I want you to write down the things that you think you need to help make that possible. And this is something that you can continue to do over the course of the year. So now that we have this sort of overarching idea of where we want to be at the end of the year, we're going to go ahead and get into the good stuff. A little bit about practice theory and what goes on in our minds and all of that stuff, and also how we can actually put it into action. And then we'll talk about some fun tips for practicing, and we'll talk a little bit more about what Spark Practice is doing this year. So, intentional practice is basically the recipe for supercharged improvement. Again, we're pulling on neuroscience, sports psychology, top musical training, and mindfulness all together to do this in a way that's safe neurologically, but also really allows us to go for it and have great performances where we can be confident and really strive for musical excellence. So the first part of this is humans being humans. We're all human, it happens, and we have some really amazing parts of our system that help us and hurt us and keep us from feeling comfortable on stage and all of that. And the first one just is that your brain wants to keep you safe. So it will do anything it possibly can to keep you safe. And any potentially stressful situation, and a lot of people have probably heard this part before, but any potentially stressful situation where previously, and by previously I mean when we were cave people, we would be run down by a lion or something like that. We haven't evolved that much to have a different basic response. So anything that feels really stressful or dangerous, our body interprets as, oh my gosh, we're gonna get eaten by a lion. Like, no, it's cool, it's just your exam. Nobody's getting eaten here, it's totally fine. But at the very core of us, we don't know the difference. And so our body does everything that it can to protect itself so that we don't run into that problem. So how does that manifest? Well, first of all, we have our basic responses of fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. I personally think these come out in our playing, where fight, sometimes we tend to play a little bit more aggressively. Flight, we speed up and just want to get off stage, and our self-talk is just, get me out of here, I hate this, like, make it be over. Freeze can just literally be that, where we just draw a blank and don't know what to do, and we start to have memory problems and just kind of seize up. And fawn, I personally think this comes out a lot when, especially if we're playing like an audition with piano or something like that, we'll sort of lose our own center of pitch and phrase, and we'll start to play with the accompaniment, or we'll start to play, we'll follow other people rather than being responsible for our own part. And that's kind of a fawn response. So those are the 4 basic responses. And then, just to make sure that you don't get eaten by lions or jump off cliffs unnecessarily, even before we get on stage, and this can be months before, it could be minutes before, our body tries to throw a bunch of stuff at us to say, no, 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 stay safe, you don't need that, oh my gosh, run in the other direction, blah! And this could be tendonitis, this could be throwing up, this could be, you know, so many things coming in. This could be like crazy self-talk. This could be not being able to sleep, completely stressing out about, you know, oh my gosh, I have to go play for this thing, it's gonna be horrible, I hate this person that I don't like is gonna be there, there's gonna be all this stuff, blah, 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 blah. And we let it negatively impact us because we don't usually realize some of that stuff is gonna be real. People are stupid. Okay, we know this. But for the most part, like, if we let them come and live in our brains already and impact how we're preparing and how we play, we've given away our power and we're never going to be able to say what we want to say. Okay? So just know that when we start to have stress responses like, oh my gosh, I really don't want to do that, I think that it's really stupid, it's going to be terrible, or we start to feel like we're getting like crisped up in our practicing and things like that, or just start to have these sort of negative self-talk, or oh my gosh, you're so dumb, you're never going to be able to play that right, or all the things we can imagine or that we've told ourselves before, the first thing to do is just say, hey, thank you, body and mind, I see you caring about this. Yes, it is important. And then once we start to have that kind of conversation with ourselves, we have access to so many other tools to be able to incorporate that into our practice to be super solid mentally, musically, and mechanically. Okay. So the next part of that is that we have 2 brains. We have practice brain and we have performance brain. And practice brain is the part where we're going to go in and be a curious detective, and we're going to find out all this stuff, and we're going to see how things are going, and like, how can this be better, and how can I fix it, and what do I want it to sound like, and what is this going on, and listening back to recordings saying, oh, I wish that were a little bit more like this, so I hear this, that isn't exactly what I was trying to say. And performance brain is the free, creative, artistic brain. That's the one that's saying, and now I get to go over here, and what a beautiful flower, and here I'm going to go under a bridge, and then it's the sunrise, you know, or whatever, and it sounds very silly, but, you know, that's how we play. We're telling stories. We're engaging in that sort of creative ideation, and that's performance brain. We can't criticize and create at the same time, which means that we need to practice both practice brain and performance brain so that when we get on stage, we know how to engage the right one at the right time, and also in the practice room. Okay, discipline versus motivation. Duh, duh, duh. Everybody talks about motivation like, oh, I'm so not motivated to practice. I really just I'm losing all motivation. I don't really want to do that. It's so annoying. Blah, 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 blah. And that's fine. That means that you actually don't really care about getting to where you want to go. And if you say you want to get somewhere, it's just talk. So what needs to come and support that is a manageable, strategic way of getting yourself to show up for yourself regularly, which is the discipline element, so that the motivation comes with. Because some days you'll be more motivated than others, and some days you'll feel more like sticking to your routine or sticking to your discipline than other times. But it's a muscle, just like everything else. And so when we exercise that muscle, it gets stronger. And so with discipline comes motivation. Big secret. What? But we don't mic drop because we respect audio engineers. Yeah, so how do we actually do that? We're moving into the theory and action part. Well, we need to have a strategic framework to practice. We need to have a way to stay disciplined so that motivation comes and stays more engaged. And we know that a lot of the way to do that is through community and fun and play. So the most that we can have community and fun and play in our practicing and in our regular routine, the further we're going to go and the further we're going to be able to want to show up, which means that the further we'll be able to go in achieving our goals and our dreams. Ta-da! Okay, anyway, yeah, so having a systematic framework just means understanding our minds and our practice strategies that work best for us in a way that helps us move forward and move through what we're trying to accomplish. Putting it into action means developing a system for ourselves to show up for ourselves in a way that makes the most sense. If it is having a community, if it's having specific little goals, if it's understanding our sort of why, which is another leading factor in motivation, but that's going to be a talk that we do in the practice room pretty soon. And all of those things playing together will actually moves the boat along a lot faster. So, and I love boats, so I talk about boats a lot, but you're going to learn a lot about boats as we develop our relationship. But when those things are working together, not only do we feel better about what we're doing, but what we're doing actually translates better, and we're moving everything forward into a place of neurological safety so that we know that we're human. The brain's going to come in and try to fritz out and throw us shrapnel. We know that we don't always feel motivated, but we've put a system in place to have a sort of discipline and communal discipline where everybody has their own goals and they're working towards their own goals. And we have this sort of like systematic framework to be able to get there. I like to use Spark Practice, personally. All right, so let's talk about how to put theory into action and actually show up for your goals. Like, so much of this is like great because there are so many resources out there of learning how to learn. This isn't something that we actually learn in conservatory, which is kind of a bummer. We learn music theory, we learn history, we learn how to play our instrument, but we don't really learn how to practice, and we don't really learn how to learn. which is a huge bummer because then people are like, slow practice or practice a lot. And then we don't slow practice correctly. We forget that there are a million other tools out there. And if we practice a lot, we get hurt. Lame! So I'm here to change that conversation and, start to sprinkle in some other things that help us get to where we want to go without being totally screwed up either on the way or when we get there. Which is kind of the case of the status quo from, previous generations of music making. Like, I know that with most of my friends in top conservatories, a lot of the people that we have studied under haven't really thought about this in a way that helps us move forward elegantly and feeling safe about what we're doing and feeling confident and knowing that we can trust like what we're doing on stage and in the practice room. So I think it's time to really change that conversation, and we have so many tools now to be able to do that. And whether it's Spark Practice or whether it's something else, like, go forth, because I'm really sick of seeing people burn out and having like nervous breakdowns be a normal thing. We don't need that anymore. Okay, thanks. How to put theory into action, showing up for your goals. Dun, dun. It's a good thing to be human. It is. I really do believe this. It means that not only do we have the possibility of connecting with each other, we have the possibility of reflection, we have the possibility of creation. We can do so many things with our humanity, and the best way to get from point A to point B is to be a little bit mediocre. And what I mean by that is that if we're all systems go for, let's say, 10 years, doesn't that sound like a burnout waiting to happen? We're going to go a lot further if we actually use science and sports psychology and, taught musical training and all of that, and taking what's good from all of those things and distilling them down into really strategic ways to improve quickly in a way that's neurologically safe. Because when we're neurologically safe, that's going to mean that we're physically safe, that's going to mean that we are mentally strong, and we can be strong mentally, musically, and mechanically. So what I mean when I say it's a good thing to be a human, is that we love to info gather, we love to accumulate resources, we love to reflect on these things, either positively or negatively. We love to psych ourselves out. We love to rely on other people to help us form our opinions about things. We love to compare ourselves to other people and recordings and many things that go on outside of our control. And all of that's great because it means that we can also make choices about what we use and what we let go. A lot of what we've done before, just generationally speaking, is that we haven't really been active in curating our thoughts and our strategies and sort of fixing things that maybe were a little bit broken before. But we actually have the capacity to neurologically rewire our brains, and this happens in the learning process, and it also happens in the relearning process, which is something that probably each of us has had to do with a piece or a part of our technique or something like that over time. And so when I say it's good to be human, it means that it's really great that we have the capacity to evolve. Hey. So a lot of what we do with Spark Practice and just sort of this community and this modality is saying, all right, what's the good stuff that we're going to take with us, and what's the stuff that we don't need anymore? And then working in a way that we're really accenting this neurological safety and this excellence in a way that's productive and not in a way that's destructive. Okay. So the next part is actually doing it. what does that actually mean? It's a lot of good fluff, but how do we actually put it into practice? And that's really the difference that we bring in between just accumulating theory and accumulating ideas and accumulating like research and all of that. We absolutely need that because we're learning so much about the mind, we're learning so much about how things work and all of that. But personally, I found for a long time that it was really overwhelming, and I didn't know how to translate that into like, well, what do I actually do with my instrument? Like, what do I actually do with all that info when I have to go on stage? And, the rest of my neurological system is kicking up, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't want to be here, run, hide, freeze, like all of that. And so the way that we actually can do that is by having a science based system and framework. The way that we actually can do that is by understanding and having references of like, okay, these these are my best strategies. These are the areas, that I know that in this pillar I've already learned these things and they go over here, so I know where to find them in terms of practice strategies. Or it's also knowing what we're good at and what we struggle with. Having an honest assessment of ourselves, which we can do by ourselves and we can do with other people, but we have to learn how to be autonomous in that. And it's really helpful to know the things that are helping us succeed, our strong suits, but it's also really helpful to know the things that might be holding us back. And sometimes that's technical stuff. Sometimes that's also, I'm really terrified to go on stage because my teacher told me I was terrible at violin when I was 4. We tend to forget about that part, but that part is just as essential. And so it's super duper duper important to have a place where you can explore that and learn modalities that work for you and have strategies that work for you in all of the different areas and all of the different pillars. And we're going to go through the pillars in a little bit. But when we're learning how to self-assess and how to work and how to get better, faster, stronger, all of the things so that we feel good on stage and we can really communicate what we want to do, and it comes from the inside, part of really going after that is looking at the part that is performance-based about stress. Where does that come from? What is actually holding us back? Again, in this like musical, mental, and mechanical, these 3 big areas. So I like Spark Practice because I made it up and I think it's awesome. But also it has a couple signature differences from normal normal practicing, in that first of all, we're starting with deliberate practice, and deliberate practice is basically kind of like the scientific method, where you're like, oh, okay, well, I know I'm going to work on this thing today. Oh, there's the excerpt I was looking for. I know I want to work on this thing today, so I'm going to try this strategy for this thing, and great. It's changed people's lives. Like, the number of people who get jobs right now that use this kind of practicing is much, much greater than the number of people who don't get jobs, who don't really have a plan when they go into the practice room. Spark practice is a little bit different. I like to call it intentional practice because we're taking the basics of deliberate practice and we're adding 2 essential elements. One of them is intention, so that at every moment you know kind of what your overarching goal is, you know what your overarching intention is. And this is the thing that's going to be driving you in the practice room every day. And this is also the thing that helps like marry in and boost your motivation. Because on the days that you don't want to show up, you say, here's where I want to go, and my intention is to act like the person who is where I want to be at the end of the year. What does that person do? That person does their warm-up now. It's so much easier to negotiate with yourself from that direction than just like, oh, I should practice today. Huh? Or, oh no, I have my exam! Ah! These are examples of potentially not healthy ways to go about it. So, what I propose is just actually like when there's an audition coming up or when there's an exam coming up or something like that, it's like, oh look, I get to play all this stuff. Oh look, I get to go play for these people on this date. It doesn't even matter how you feel about them individually. If even the beginning of the conversation changes from, oh, I should sign up for this, or oh, I have to do this, to, oh, look, I get to go do this thing. And then your intention is how you want to feel when you show up on that day. And I'll repeat that because it's really, really essential. But if your intention is that, okay, on this day where I get to play all this stuff for these cool people, I want to feel confident, prepared, radiant, whatever. If you have that sort of emotional signature, that's going to get you out of bed 10 times more than just, oh, I guess I should practice for this thing I really don't want to do. Does that resonate? Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. I mean, it's so silly because in most of music making, like, the answer is so ridiculously obvious when we think about it, but there's an element of thinking about it in a specific way because we're so mired by all of this other stuff, and then actually having a modality to, like, show up and do it. So, people, I got you covered. Yeah. So, there's the intention element that helps us organize our sort of emotional environment around this. And there's also what I call positive emotional signatures. And this is really helpful in the sense that these are our little emotional cues that we build within ourselves so that when we're going on stage, we're getting ready to go on stage, we're tuning, we're going through the whole thing. These are the things that help us, that we build in through a bunch of different practice strategies beforehand, that we're building in to be able to successfully go on stage and feel really good about it. It's a neurohacking meditation thing, but we can actually train ourselves to feel neutrally or positively about certain actions or action sequences or situations, so that when we're on stage, it's much easier to understand that we actually are safe, that we can remind ourselves that we're safe, that we want to be there, and that we have the opportunity to create music, which is a pretty cool thing, actually. All right, so the last part of this is success as a team sport. Yay! As you've probably experienced in the past, if you've been in a conservatory or a festival environment that's been really supportive with like great teachers and cool colleagues and stuff like that, reaching for your own goals seems a lot more accessible. When you have that support that's like, hey, we can do this, go for it, like, or you're going to a workout where it's like, oh, I have to do this and it's really painful, but I'm gonna get there, yeah! And your friend's like, yeah, you can do it, you can totally do it. And then you spot them just behind you, you have so much more of a chance of succeeding than if you're by yourself like, oh, this is hard. And that's something that I think is really important to create, especially, we have the opportunity now online to have this international community, and we've been building it for about 2 years with Audition Club so far. And it gets people jobs, and they keep coming back anyway because they just want to say hi or hang out or like help the people who are still in process. And that's what has shown me the strength of this community, is that we all go through it together, and we all go through it on the days that everything's working out, and we all go through it on the days where things are a little bit more difficult. And so far, it's been working really, really well. So whether we're in a conservatory environment that, maybe we have some of that, or maybe our studio doesn't particularly offer that sort of really constructive, supportive vibe, or we're out of school already and we're sort of trying to figure out what life is like outside of the school environment, or we're preparing for music school, or we're just looking for that sort of supportive community, that's what the practice room is for. That's really what we're there for. We're going to be talking a little bit more about what that is a little further along. We're going to go through to the second part, to the second page, with a little bit of how Spark Practice is organized. And I thought it would be fun to have this like little quiz of some of my favorite practice tips. We're going to go ahead and go through it. So Spark Practice is organized into 5 essential pillars of music making: spark, sound, performance, attuned intonation, which is also the harmonic context, rhythm, and kinetic integration. Now, the whole idea is that in every practice session, we're visiting all 5 pillars. And this means that we're getting stronger mentally, musically, mechanically, across all 5 pillars all the time, and it just helps really accelerate our level. I mean, Izzy can actually talk about that. Like, you've been kicking butt this year. I'm so proud of you. And so, going through really quickly what these 5 pillars are: sound is your unique voice. So this is not only the production of sound, but it's also the ideation of sound. If you can hear it before you play it, you're going to be more likely to be able to play what you want to communicate. And the practice tip for that, I put the telephone for like the ringtone. So using drones when you're working on sound can help you really feel where the harmonies are and feel where the sound is really resonant and filling an entire space. It's one of my favorite practice tips for the sound pillar is to use drones, because this also helps with like maintaining a good sound across technical passages. If you have a drone and always a reference, you can listen to the purity of that note in relation to something else. And I actually use a drone that has all of the harmonics in it, which is from what's called the tuning CD. And there will be in the practice room a list of references and tools and all of that stuff for everybody to share, so that we can all kick some butt. Performance. This is one of the pillars that we don't work on very often, and it is a total game changer. When we're practicing, really? Yes, it is. Yay! I love it when Izzy's like, because it's true. I mean, it's something that we don't really tend to practice often in sort of traditional conservatory education, and it really is the thing that makes the difference between feeling safe on stage or freaking out. And so when I say the pillar of performance, this is something that we're practicing every day, even, every practice session, even when we're very, very new to a piece or very, very new to a technique. So some of this is visualization. Some of this is working on a centering routine. Some of this is just feeling comfortable with the process of bringing in a story to sort of fill our bandwidth of, how much we can put through our mind, and, making sure that it's engaged fully so that when we get into a stressful situation, we're able to respond with real, well-built, well-practiced tools. And, in the 5 Pillars class, we're going to be spending a whole week on specific strategies and tools for performance, so that in our practice sessions, we have a full variety from like, I'm just learning this piece to I'm ready to perform it, that we have strategies that we can pull from and that we can be really prepared with that. And I think for that one, I put in a little video, like a clap, because one of the biggest tools with the performance pillar that we can use is self-recording. And self-recording with video is even more effective. So that's my hot tip for that. When we're looking back to a recording, we're instantly able to see our posture. We're instantly able to see what we're communicating to the audience much more clearly than from our space. And if we remember from the first part that we can't create and criticize at the same time, our job when we're practicing performance is to practice from performance brain. This is that creative ideation, go for it space. And we have all of these neurological tools built in along the way so that we can really be safe and go for it in that performance brain space. But that also, when we're doing self-recording and stuff like that, we're really focusing on engaging that performance brain. And then when we come back to it, we come back to it with practice brain. Okay. So attuned intonation is not only pitch, but it's also what is going on in the whole piece harmonically. This is something that we don't necessarily look at as closely as we can, and we tend to get hung up on, oh, it's a third, it needs to be 3 cents in one direction, whatever. That's all really important, and like understanding what a tuner is for and all of that is super important too. But it's also essential to understand like what is the harmonic structure of the piece or the etude or whatever that we're playing. Can we be in tune all across the instrument? What are the tendencies as we go from low to high or high to low? How does the weather impact us? Stuff like that. When we're preparing for performances, do we know what kind of room we're going to be in, and can we switch from a regular environment to that kind of environment? There are a lot of different ways to look at this, but the goal, again, in all of what we're doing is making sure that we have the strategies in place so that in each pillar we're strong musically, mentally, and mechanically. Okay. So my favorite tool in Spark practice, I put in attuned intonation. And Izzy, did you see what emoticon I put in?
The skeleton.
The skeleton! Yeah, girl, for the win! Perfect, yes. Okay, so thank you. She's way less cheesy about it than I am. I totally understand that because she's cool and I'm not. But that's fine. So the skeleton is a very kitsch play on words between a scale and a skeleton, which means that we're looking for the backbone of the harmony. And this is the 1, the 5, and the 4, the tonic, the dominant, and the subdominant. These are the notes that in a harmonic, like any harmony, any key, these are the notes that don't change. But it's super rare for us to go through a piece and say, okay, I'm in D major. Can I play D, A, G all over? And in this phrase, am I still in D major, or is it a different chord? Do I know the tonic, dominant, and subdominant? And so one of the best exercises that we can possibly do, which cleans up intonation but pretty much immediately, is to play through a phrase, record it, don't listen back immediately, but then take a minute, take a couple minutes, and go through and find the tonic, dominant, and subdominant, and just play those notes. Then when you feel really good about the relationship between those notes, then you fill in the rest of the scale, because those are the notes that change. Those are the notes that give us more depth and color and know kind of how to feel. Are we minor, major, is it something funky? Something like that. And then, without, banging your head against the wall, go back after just a couple minutes and play your phrase again. And you'll see, like, it just cleans everything up pretty immediately. The skeleton is like, it's worth several $1,000s just as a trick. All right, so attuned intonation is also that, but it's also like, what is the structure of your piece? If it's a sonata, do you know what key you're starting from and what key you're going to? How do you get there? Is it a composer that instead is going to take you from a safe tonic to something completely radical and you feel like you're getting kidnapped harmonically? Or is it something that's going to be really safe and just like, okay, cool, 1, 4, 5, 1, 2, 5, 1, 5, 1, the end. You know, and understanding a little bit of that helps with interpretation, but it also helps decide what's important and what's not important in terms of our priorities of what's sticking out as our challenges. Okay, rhythm. Rhythm for me is something that we tend to use as a practice strategy to clean up other things instead of remembering that rhythm in itself is a totally lovely and separate thing by itself. And so I put in the little happy person with sunglasses because I like to use grooves that I find online to practice with so that I have sort of like a drum machine, and it just makes it like a very funky metronome. And if I can play along with a very funky metronome, and you can use like world beats, you can use like rap. There are so many different beats available online. And when you're working on something and you're trying to find what the groove of that thing is, it's really helpful to switch up a metronome into something that corresponds with popular music of today. And then once we understand the groove, then we just see, oh yeah, well the old school sound was basically the same. But maybe it's a little bit less swing or a little bit less hips or a little bit less whatever. Because when it really comes down to it, rhythm is the groove. And rhythm has its own organization, just like a harmonic progression, and usually they go together. So you can have, harmonic rallentondos, harmonic accelerandos, and that's the meeting of harmony and rhythm. But when you have this sort of like architecture figured out, it's so much easier to just like fill in the little blanks and understand really how to put something together so it shines. And that, when combined with performance and kinetic integration, that's really when we're getting to a place of neurological safety on stage. So kinetic integration in itself is the pillar where we're going to be trying to fry the brain as much as possible. We're trying to meld it all together and be very silly and dance around and sing and count and clap and do all the things that tie up our mind and music making and body, so that regardless of what we're doing, it's so ingrained in every part of our system that we can absolutely do it with our eyes closed backwards at 2 in the morning, right? So a lot of times this means like clapping and counting, clapping and singing along, walking and singing along and stuff like that. But the one that I put in as my like secret practice trick for today's class is the roller coaster, and this is one of my favorite things to do. And basically it's just that you're going to use vertical space and you're going to dance around and you're going to dance out your dynamics. So if it's forte, you're forte. If it's piano, you're piano. And like a roller coaster, you're just going to go around and figure out you're going to map out in space vertically what your dynamic story arc is. And this is something that's really fun because then when you get to accents or you get to crescendos or you get to funny other little adjustments in articulation and all of that, you have to decide how your roller coaster is going to act in those moments. But anyway, so in kinetic integration, again, we're just really trying to mix it all together, and this is an element that can be the most fun, but it's also the thing that as serious musicians, we tend to avoid the most. So really creating that sort of space for play is an essential element of learning something quickly and in a way that you're going to have great recall, and so that when you get on stage, you're actually daring to be creative. Because when you get on stage, nobody wants to hear a recital just like this the entire time. I'm very important, I'm very serious, and you can take me seriously because you can trust that everything that I'm saying is exactly something that you should listen to and have a nice life. I hope you had a very emotional experience. Nobody wants to go to that concert. Ew. So why would we practice that way? Why, when we're talking about practice, we would talk that way? You know, practice is supposed to be fun. Practice is supposed to be so many different things, because not only scientifically do we know that it takes 10 times fewer repetitions to actually learn something in a way that's easily recalled and has like a higher fidelity when we learn it through play than if we learn it through like vegetable eating practice. It just, when we're doing that, and imagine like when we're doing fun practice that helps us be silly, that helps us embrace the awkward so that we find out really the story we want to tell in a community that's like everybody's going for crazy goals and is supportive, and everybody knows that like they each have their own schedule, they each have their own, you know, motivation and capacities and constraints and all of that, that it doesn't matter, we're all going for it anyway. It helps people get there so much faster, so much quicker. So that's a tour of the 5 Spark Practice pillars. Spark, sound, performance, attuned intonation, rhythm, and kinetic integration. And again, every time we go in a practice session, we hit all 5 pillars. Okay. So the other way that Spark Practice was organized is that we have a couple different ways of implementing it. Either we can go through and use the practice timer, which comes from interleaved interval training. So we're pulling on neuroscience and sports psychology and just sports training, where on the website, in the practice room, there's a timer that's 5 times 5 minutes with a 5-minute break. So in 1/2 hour, you're kind of sprinting through practice strategies to resolve specific problems. You're not bored, you keep it moving, and by the end of it, you've had a really complete training session. Or you can just say, okay, I'm going to practice for an hour straight. I have 5 minutes on this pillar, I have 10 minutes on this pillar, I want to spend half an hour on this pillar. You can organize it however you want. It depends on what your goals are, it depends on how much time you have, it depends on, what you're trying to learn, how quickly. And also it just depends on, where you are in your preparation phases. You're going to be doing a lot more just getting notes in and all of that in the loading phase of a competitive cycle rather than a competition phase where you're going to be doing much more mental work. One thing that I didn't say earlier, but is also an essential thing just to know about the brain, is that practice brain goes with mental practice. Performance brain goes with visualization. But when you're doing work away from the instrument, it counts just as much because your mind doesn't really know the difference. So we need enough of a reference physically to understand what we're doing, so that when we work on it in our minds that we can actually make it productive work. But we don't need to give ourselves tendonitis. We don't need to give ourselves back injuries. We don't need to give ourselves all of that because there's so many other ways to go about it. Okay, so a couple major things coming up. On the PDF, we're going to remember that first question that we asked ourselves, which is where I want to be at the end of the year. And then you can go through this little checkbox thing at the bottom on the left, which says, what do I need to reach my goals? And I offer better strategies, practice ideas, more time, organization, a holistic approach, consistency, autonomy, confidence, security, accountability, performance opportunities, mock auditions, community, and just, Spark Practice in general. And through the classes and the programs that we're doing this year, you can actually get all of them, all of it. So I have I have one upcoming class, and we're opening the practice room membership. There are already some people in it, and there are already some elements of Audition Club that are spilling over as well. But in the Formula and Foundations class, this is 5 weeks Each class this session through is 2 hours long, so we're going to go much more in depth. And now that Spark Practice has existed for a year, everything has a facelift. We're going to have a little bit of time for question and answer. Also, how to apply this in teaching studios, how to apply it in our own practice, how to apply it when we're working with a teacher as well. And all of the feedback that we've gotten is that, well, there's the empirical feedback of people are winning jobs and academy spots and all of that stuff. But there's also the anecdotal feedback of students are a lot more autonomous. They're asking better questions. They're getting much more out of their lessons, and just improving a lot more quickly. So this round is 5 weeks, 10 hours of training, and we're doing all live classes this time. You'll have access to the replay for a few months after, but we're going to be using each pillar to go through in-depth strategy. So you have practical applications, specific strategies for the practice room and your teaching studio, efficiency and autonomy for you and your students. So the goal really is that when you come out of this, you're gonna have specific strategies from just meeting a piece to ready to perform to after performance, so that you or your students will be strong mentally, mechanically, and musically. And in that, now it's a college level course, and you have PDF support and also a practice journal to take you through 10 weeks of practicing. So it'll go for your practice journal, will go through the 5 weeks of classes, but you'll also have that accompaniment through 5 weeks after that, and then you can renew your journal or whatever. All right, so that's the Formula and Foundations class. And the very, very cool thing for this year that just happened was that one of my students last year is a Suzuki teacher in Texas, and this completely transformed her teaching studio. And so she pitched it to Suzuki of America, Suzuki Association of America, and now the Foundations class counts as Suzuki teacher training, which is so amazing! Yay! I know, it's so cool. Oh my gosh. But what that just means to me is that, like, you know, with all of my other students' successes, and I mean, I only get good news, and if there's an element of feedback that we need to work through, like, I'm so happy to do that too. But for the most part, like, all I've been getting are really, really positive feedback, and the fact that it's going into the Suzuki teacher training credit just means that there's a real impact. And so if that's something that's interesting to you, please do sign up. Another offering that we have this year with Spark Practice is the practice room. And I'm super excited about this because it's basically like a gym membership, but for practicing. And I know that a lot of people struggle with accountability and community and having that sort of positive reinforcement and drive and motivation and all of that. So what we found with Audition Club, which is a project that's been going on for 2 years now, where professional musicians playing for each other, professional and pre-professional, sometimes, you can come play for us, Izzy, are coming in and playing mock auditions, upcoming exams, upcoming concerts, stuff like that. And out of that group, a quarter of the group has won full-time jobs, including wind soloists, and everybody else has either advanced in auditions, gotten to finals, or won sublist auditions through recordings and live. And yeah, it's basically just kicking butt. So we're building on sort of that vibe. And if for the people who got here at the very, very beginning, we're just finishing Audition Club with one of our Audition Club people who has an audition next week. And maybe you were a little bit surprised we were talking about the mental game as well. And this is, so the practice room is a community where we're going to be talking about not only like great practice strategies, sharing tips and insights, but also going through the things of like, you know, am I good enough? What's my mental game a week before an important playing opportunity? I had a weird lesson. I don't really know what my teacher meant when they said X. whatever. All of that stuff is fair game. And it's basically like an international instrumental studio where we're really focused on, achieving our goals, but also in that sort of healthy community and neurological safety and all of that, so that everybody can be celebrated in their way, and that, we each have our own path and we each have our own trajectory, and we can always encourage other people in getting there and feel encouraged as we set our goals and actually really go for them. It's really exciting because we have over 25 meetups over the course of each week. And some of them are like practice rendezvous where we'll just set the practice timer and go for it, and somebody will be the timekeeper, and every 5 minutes be like 5 minutes. And it's the kind of thing where you just like show up and work it out, and it's basically like you're showing up to the gym with your best friends. And it's video on, sound off, and it's a way to not only install that element of performance where you know that other people are around, so we tend to be a little bit more focused in what we're doing, but it's also a way to count on the community for accountability for yourself. So we have a couple different times over the course of the day to accommodate different time zones. And also at the beginning of the week, we have what's called a stand-up, where people just go around the room really briefly and just say, okay, my goal for this, or my intention for this week is X. And so you know what you're going for, and that you can ask people to support you with that. And if you can just say like, hey, I'm on vacation, have a great time. Or, I have this thing coming up in 3 weeks, and my goal this week is to record everything and feel like I can perform the way that I want to into my video recorder, or it can just be, I'm really busy, but my intention for the week is to have a good warm-up session every day, whatever it is. But just to have that sort of group accountability of a stand-up really, really changes the game. It's something that we do that people do in the tech world, but, in the practice room, it's not something that we necessarily have done before. And it's a chance for us to like digest what our teachers trying to get us to do, or if we have our own goals, to be able to reach for them. We also have other group training, so talking about research and practice strategies that are up and coming and other cool news. We have an official Yoga for Musicians class with my best friend Gwen, and she is a fantastic violist and teacher and yogi and yoga teacher based in Liverpool. And so she's going to be taking us through several yoga classes over the course of each month. We have expert guests that are coming in for both Audition Club and for the practice room. Support and accountability with the other people in the practice room and just like in this international community. It's really quite cool. We have a weekly call, which is just everybody who wants to show up to talk about stuff going on. We'll have sort of a subject each week so that we can talk about different things coming up, whether it's like how to set up our practice over spring or over summer break, or who has auditions coming up, who has stuff coming up, different struggles. Sometimes we'll do a practice masterclass where we'll bring in the stuff that we're struggling with the most and get everybody to put their heads together to try to find solutions. I put in safe mocks. Well, Audition Club is really all about that. It's about starting to mock audition early so that we're building in that tolerance to stress through the conversion phase of our competitive preparation. And really building in that safety so that we know that we will be safe on stage and we can really go for it. And then, of course, there's plenty of bonus material. There's some pre-recorded videos. There's a reference of plenty of other little talks that I've given, that other people have come and given, guest juries, stuff like that. So that is going to be really exciting. And if you get the whole year together, you get 2 months for free. So that's quite cool. It's like you get summer for free. And on top of that, because you came to the talk, if you use Spark Practice Family, you get 150 euros off of either the class or the practice room membership. So I think it's going to be a really cool year. I'm really excited to see what everybody did in this past year has been just totally phenomenal, and to see it happening. We're building more partnerships with schools, we're building more partnerships with other organizations, and I think it's going to be really exciting to see the conversation change and to see more and more of the people in the Spark Practice community succeed. On the website, please do sign up. It's going to be really cool. The Formula and Foundations class has been totally revamped. And the practice room is $60 a month, but if you pay for the whole year, you get the discount and you get the summer for free. And if you want to do both of them, then there's an extra discount on top of it, and it's ridiculous. But I really, really hope you consider it. And either way, it's super happy. I'm super happy to see all of you. And I really look forward to working together this year. Thank you so much for being here tonight. It's been a pleasure, and we'll see you guys really soon.